I wonder if you know what's in this bag. And you'll understand why.
Bitcoin.
I wish, I wish. In this bag, there are 3 boxes of chocolate. So you're going to wonder why. Well, my aim today is to make you understand what blockchain is with these 3 boxes of chocolate. And if I do that right, then I will have done my job. So, now, more seriously, if we go back, I mean, that's a very arrogant title and presumptuous, Blockchain technology and the film industry in China paving the way to a global web media 3.0. That's the end game. That's basically where we're going. It's not going to happen tomorrow. We have to be very critical, actually, about this and about this technology. I'm not here to shoehorn this technology into your brains. I'm here to look at it critically. I'm not all in favor of blockchain. I'm not all in favor of cryptos. I think there's certain things that are good and other things that are concerning, to say the least. So this is where I'm coming from. So again, thank you very much to USC Annenberg for this opportunity here. Now, is that a right presentation? No, it is. All right, you got a black and white picture here, Back to the Future, 1985. The reason why I put that here is not just to show a picture of me when I was 11 with my cat in my arms, but just to tell you there's 2 reasons why I put this picture. One is going to be vital if you want to get one of these boxes of chocolate later on at the end of the session. The other one is 1985. Not 1994, 1985, 1 year later. I was a geek, programming computer games on an old Amstrad 6128. I said that to Craig earlier. I had a lot of fun doing this. It was creative. It was about computer science. It was about technology. It was exciting. By the way, the Amstrad 6128 is still working. No planned obsolescence at the time. Amstrad is gone, I think, the company, unfortunately, but the product's still working. So that was 1985, the desktop era. Where war games was the reason why I bought this computer, because I thought I could start a thermonuclear war just from my home in Bordeaux, in the southwest of France. Never did, thank God, But fast forward 10 years, and I think it's very interesting to fast forward always 10 years. 1995, that was the heart of the adoption of internet. That's where around that time when you had films like, it's fine.
Trying to keep the band at bay.
So that's the year 1995, around that year, it could be 1996, 1997, where Blair Witch Project came out as an interesting way to advertise a film. But that was the internet era. Fast forward 10 years, 2005. Really the core adoption of mobile phones that were going to become smartphones. Fast forward 10 years, 2015, that's now blockchain. That's after it recovered from the Mongox, let's call it hack, and where people started really regaining interest in the technology as well as Bitcoin. And that's important, the technology, the intrinsic technology blockchain is not Bitcoin and vice versa. Now, I will run really quickly through this. I'm not even sure actually it's necessary after what Clayton has done, but I just on a summary, 8 years in banking, some of which in film finance, 12 in film production on the creative side and the financial side. Then the PhD, they managed to lure me into this permanent head damage type research, which ended up with this book here, on which you can find most of it on Google Books. By the way, do not buy this book. Or you can find it in the library here, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, in the history of the U.S.-China history, you're the first person to say don't buy the book.
Yeah, don't buy the book.
He's a businessman. He doesn't need it.
Maybe. No. What I'm saying is, it's a little overpriced, and maybe you don't want to, you don't want to do that. There are other ways to get it without pirating it, by the way. And then the ACIM Center, Research Center, they gave me the opportunity to sort of experiment with this research. And Lumiere, as you mentioned it, with the film that we recently securitized, which is now on the race to the Oscars. Will it get shortlisted in the nomination? Will it be nominated? We don't know. It's the nomination of Algeria already for this film. And we thought it was a good idea because we love this film. So practitioner and academic. There's a bit of schizophrenia there. Just suffice to say that this book, 470 pages, is really the work of more than 4 years of research, because I started in 2009 when I first, 2008 really, when I first came to Hong Kong and China. So a lot of people have been interviewed, a lot of professionals, a lot of academics. Stanley Rosen is sitting here. He's been unfortunately subject to the exercise, but that's, you know, it was an interesting journey that brings me here to tell you about this. At the end of this session, I think I will have done my job if you know what blockchain is, how it can be integrated or adapted to the film industry, but the creative industries at large, how it's currently being developed by China, and what are its limitations, and in the short term, medium term, and long term, what we think, and I say we, not just me, but all the people that I've been talking to and consult with, is going to be a likely adoption of this technology, and particularly in the creative industries. So, starting with what is blockchain technology? Oof. First question, a good question. Who has ever heard about Bitcoin before Clay mentioned it? Wow, that's actually pretty good. Yeah. Who has heard about Ethereum? Okay. Who has ever used anything, Bitcoin, Ethereum, electronic wallet, whatever it is? Yes. Okay. Congratulations. Actually, I've been in a lot of rooms where no one did, which shows you how the adoption, where the adoption is at this point, right? Which basically makes me say to you, okay, there are two ways to explain blockchain, the hard way and the smooth way. I'm going to give you the hard way first, which is this. But I'm going to try to make it as light as possible. First, it's not rocket science. I mean, literally, it's not. It's basically distributed ledger technology. What does that mean? It started 30 years ago. It's not yesterday, it's not 10 years ago, it's 30 years ago. Nick Szabo, it was one of the precursors of it. MIT has done a huge amount of research in it. USC, I mean, all the major US universities were way ahead of it. As internet was being rolled out, this technology started. So it's not from yesterday. Now, what is it? It's basically a glorified Excel spreadsheet, if you wish. But the particularity of this Excel spreadsheet is that every transaction on it, and when I mean transaction, we talk data, that happen to be changed on it is time-stamped and immutable. So once you change something, you got a record, and this record will be kept forever. So people are going to say, well, but that's only data. But what is money today? Zeros and ones, pretty much, particularly in China, when you pay with your mobile phone and a QR code. So transactions mean anything from money, information, files, that can be music, cinema. So you're starting to see where I'm going now. Now, in Chinese, 区块链, that's the direct translation. They have their own name for it, that's it. It's integrated already in the idea that data is going to be run with this technology. Now, this concept of proof of work, essentially, how does it work? You have nodes. And this Excel spreadsheet is accessible by everybody. Let's imagine we all can access the spreadsheet. To be able to make one transaction, you have to solve a very complex algorithm, a cryptographic algorithm, which then validates a transaction and creates a block, which shows that the transaction has actually taken place at a certain time. And so on and so forth for any change on the ledger, which means essentially you have a chain of blocks that cannot be changed unless everybody, well, at least 51% agrees that it should be changed, which makes it very difficult, actually, for anybody to say, you know what, let's rewrite history. It just doesn't happen. Now, dApps. And so most of it started with proof of work. Essentially, this calculation now, people are thinking about different ways like Ethereum of staking, essentially keeping a certain amount of cryptocurrencies that would help and validate these transactions. Decentralized applications are essentially the vehicle that have been built since from 2014, 2016 to allow smart contracts, essentially contracts that given certain conditions will automatically affect a transaction. So no human interaction needed. A computer will do it automatically if the parameters are met. And it's open source. That's the beauty of it. Yeah, you can copy and paste literally the code and create your own. You know, that there's nobody's going to come and say, hey, you owe me that amount of money, which means fast adoption, fast development. You know, and not always good, but fast. Now we're getting to the chocolate. Life is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you're going to get, right? Well, by coming here tonight, you probably didn't. Now, that's a practical definition. So I would challenge anybody, but I don't want to put anybody under the spot here to repeat what I've just said right now, because it's something I noticed after several presentations. I was talking to people after the presentation, and people were like, I was like, okay, well, how would you explain that to your friends? And people were like, well, it's proof of work, and it's difficult. It's very difficult, actually. It's very abstract. And the human brain is not meant to do that. Computers are meant to do that, not us. So I have a very practical experience, so everybody gets it. And it started in Cannes this year, so it's very recent. But I found actually it was working well. Let's imagine the world without blockchain. So a world without blockchain, I would take Stanley. We would go into the corridor, I would give him the box of chocolate. None of you would know about it. And the transaction would be affected like this without your knowledge. That's the world as we know it today, actually. There's another way, and that's the blockchain way, and that's essentially each one of us, including myself, we all, Craig over there, everybody is part of, has access to this ledger, this transaction, and we're all witnesses, essentially, of this. And so what I'm going to do at the end of the session, after the Q&A, I'm going to ask you a question, 3 questions. 3 boxes of chocolates, 3 questions. The person who answers the fastest with the right answer, we'll all be witnesses of this, we'll get the box of chocolate at a particular time, and it will be locked in history, essentially our collective memory. That's what blockchain is at the end of the day. Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not going to go into the smart contracts, just the basic concepts. So that's it. I mean, as I said, it's not rocket science. So we will embody the blockchain at the end of this presentation. Now, why? I think that's a big question, actually. Even more important than what is it? You know, why are we doing all this? And I think that's the power of academia in this game, because I've been in the professional sector of blockchain, and everybody is obviously looking at you with big dollar signs, and that's what matters, and that's the only thing that matters. And the beauty of academia is we can step backwards, and that's why I like to also engage with academia and see why are we doing this. Sorry for Jurassic Park for literally taking the photo away, but there's like Forrest Gump, fair use, because I'm not selling anything here, not even chocolates. Crisis of value. I think that's the reason why blockchain has spread so fast and why it's been created. It all comes up, hello. It all comes up from cryptography originally. I mean, cryptography is nothing new. It's like thousands and thousands of years old. I mean, the Egyptians and people before them, actually, cultures and entire paradigms actually got created around cryptography about getting a message to somebody. I'm not going to reread the definition, but getting a message across somebody else without it being seen. That's how the Second World War was partly won. I mean, I'm sure everybody has seen, you know, the film about Turing. That's the idea. Once you break the code, you get access to communication. So that's very military-based. I mean, the internet was developed by the military, and I'm pretty sure the story goes along. A man called Satoshi Nakamoto came up single-handedly with the entire technology to create Bitcoin and mint Bitcoin, and therefore blockchain technology, and circulated, never published, but circulated a white paper to a group of well-renowned cryptographers around the world, and that was in 2008. In 2009, a few months later, the first Bitcoin was mined. And because this Satoshi Nakamoto is a cryptographer, is a bit of a player, essentially. He put an encrypted message, which is right here in the Coinbase, which once you decrypt it, shows the headlines of the Times of that day, the 3rd of January 2009. Like right after the heat of the crisis, when the banks were bailed a second time. Chancellor of break of second bailout for banks. And he didn't choose that as a matter of coincidence, I think. Now, who's this man? No one knows. I don't think it's a man. I think it's a group of people. I think he would be absolutely frustrated if I said that, but I think Nick Szabo is probably part of that group. Who knows? Maybe he was associated. No one knows. The truth is, this is just a legend, yet Bitcoin was minted. And that was the beginning of essentially what blockchain was going to become. So very important. I personally think that's speculative. I have nothing to back it up. I've heard people trace back this mysterious message from Satoshi Nakamoto. Apparently it's coming from MIT, an MIT address, but then again, somebody could use a VPN and maybe they've sent it from Russia with MIT address, who knows? At this point, it's not even important anymore. I think is what we have now. That's important. And what we have now is we're going from what used to be the intranet into the internet of trust or internet of value. That can compensate for this crisis of value, potentially. So there are two things that I'd like to describe about this sort of complex diagram, which is coming from the Spatial Web, Dan Mapes and Gabriel René. One, when you hear blockchain is here, this is it, get on your gears because this is happening right now. No, it's not. It takes, and it will take time. I mean, think about the internet, and I'm always saying perspective. It really started in the 70s, the concept. It was really rolled out at the end of the 80s. It started with intranet, which we don't even know what it is anymore, but some of the people here have seen it. What an intranet is essentially is an enterprise solution of internet in a private, set up in a private way that allows for certain people to communicate with each other outside of the real world, sort of the wider world. And I think that's what we're going through with blockchain now. And it facilitates adoption. If you put these solutions, enterprise, B2B solutions into big companies, there are people working in these companies. We always see these big companies as Bank of America, British Airways. Well, there's thousands of people working in there and thousands of people using it. Therefore, they get used to this. And I think adoption into blockchain is coming through enterprise, like the internet facilitated the adoption of internet. Nobody paid with a credit card in the 1990s. I mean, unless you wanted to be robbed in daylight, basically. So it took 20 years, really. And then to have PayPal and other secure, safe ways to pay. So I think we're going through the same adoption rate, but maybe faster because the world is already connected. And it's all connected in a big way with mobile phones, with tablets, with laptops, etc. Now, where we're going, I think pure speculation. Don't bank your money on this, but I think we're going towards a converging world. You could call it media convergent, but in terms of interface, we're using smartphones now, mobile phones. We're soon going to wear just wearables. And it's going to be enhanced reality, XR, IoT. Some of the tasks are going to be dealt with directly by computers through smart contracts, decentralized applications. And the overall underlying grid here is going to be in peer-to-peer. so decentralized. Essentially, the way data flows is going to be through person to person. It's no longer going to be centralized. Even cloud is already a little centralized. And what we call named data network. Essentially, everybody will be identified through a node. So think about it, because this has pluses, pros and cons, clearly. Now, I'm going to pass that, but I'm going to talk really, how do you use blockchain in the creative industries? I'm not going to go through all the uses, because I think you're all going to fall asleep otherwise. But just take 3 or 4 of those. In terms of rights management, remember what I was saying about the ledger? Like if we all have a ledger that we have access to, we can all know who owns what in any film at any one point in time. And if there is a change, if somebody sells those rights to someone else, if somebody sells their participation in the film, as a creative agent, for example, as a director, as a writer, so I'm talking about the chain of titles as well, then that can be recorded in the ledger, and you will know at any one point in time, everybody will be able to tell, okay, this guy owns that much of the film, and this guy owns that much, and this guy no longer owns. It's been changed. And that's immutable. Once it's done, it's done. Now, it also allows for transactions to be recorded and monitored. So if you're an investor, every penny, in a way, you put in the film ends up roughly on the screen, at least a bit better than now. There's a principle of disintermediation, so let me explain that. It's really to do with the micropayments. At the moment, the way the industry works, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows that, but even publishing, actually, even this book, if you look at it, ironically, is you do not get paid every time somebody buys your book or watches your film. As an author, as a filmmaker, as a producer, you get paid, and you got to collect your revenue. You know, you have different ways to collect your revenue. You can use a collection agent, distributor. You can trust a distributor to do it. But essentially, what happens is you get aggregated amounts. You don't get per click or per ticket amounts. Now, with this, essentially, that's what you get. Every time somebody clicks on your film, pays for it, $1 even, the price of the ticket gets broken down into various ownership wallets. You know, so it gets into an electronic wallet, say 5% or $1 goes into, say, the director. The investors, say 20% goes straight into their wallet, and so on and so forth for every single click, every single ticket. Now, you don't need a collection agent, you don't need auditors, because this is done automatically, and you can trust the computer to do it, because the computer cannot be bribed. That's the thing, you know, if it's done properly, if it's designed properly. So now this is impossible, clearly, because to do that with a bank, it would cost you about 100 times more to set up this system than with a system that essentially will charge you literally nothing for establishing these transactions and effecting these transactions. That's a big thing. That will be a big thing. And I will go back to it on why this is not already happening. Piracy, harder, obviously, once everything is watermarked and it's under one registry, it'll be very difficult to pirate films. It's also, on the other side of the coin, going to be very difficult to take down content because it's up there forever. So censorship, think about censorship in that context. And something that's very, very often overlooked, but I really like it, and that's more long-term, is the idea that this is open source. It's a peer-to-peer network. There are groups called the Zimuzus. I've seen a smile on Clay's face here. Beng Bing-chun started in 2012 talking about those groups. Emily Ye and Darryl Davis from Lingnan University in Hong Kong wrote extensively about it. Who has heard about the Zimuzus, by the way? All right. Well, those are groups of people who, in China, will translate and subtitle your film 24 hours after its release. So you get the film, it's in English, it's in Turkish, it's in whatever language you want it. If they think it has an appeal, They will go in groups of 10s and 20s. They will translate. They will upload the subtitles, and the film will be available with Chinese subtitling. That's amazing. Do they get paid? Not always. Actually, most of the times they don't get paid. They get rewards, digital gifts, if you wish. They get recognized by their peers. They do that literally for the good of other people, to share the films, so people understand the film. That's interesting, I think, you know, that's very interesting. In fact, they're so good and so well professionally organized, because they are professionally organized, they're not just a bunch of hackers trying to do stuff. They're very well organized, and they're so well organized that big corporations even are like, well, can we use your services? And occasionally they do, but they have not been co-opted by these companies, because they do have a certain mindset which is associated with peer-to-peer and open source. I think this is pretty interesting, and the truth is, not now, again, but in the future, it could give rise actually to digital communities that are way more creative than what we see today in a very centralized world. Watch out, I would say. Now, this is very quickly looking at how the state of play, all these companies that have essentially developed blockchain solutions. In fact, I should have put Millennium also up there. We've got somebody there because they've been very active on this. And sorry for putting Lumiere so big, because I shouldn't be actually putting it so big, but okay. That's the only bit of advertising you see from me there. It's getting crowded, you know. Like 2014, 2016, there was one company, Singularity TV. They came up, they're called Breaker now. They're here. A lot of admiration for these guys. They started it. They started with a vision. They're based out of New York. They have offices in Hong Kong, and they're still at it. I mean, at some point they were sitting on 500 to 700 million US dollar at the heat of the ICO wave, at the heat of Bitcoin when it was around 20,000 US dollar. They had a massive amount of money. They could have been a mini studio, actually. No, problem, they didn't have a treasury department. So they didn't sell their assets on time, and now they're way smaller, but they're still alive. So I give them that, definitely. A lot of respect for them. You got a huge array of companies. I'm not going to go through them, but they are ranging from VOD streaming, distribution, theatrical or online, rights management, film finance, and production services, a little more rare. So it's a growing thing. Let's say what we've done very briefly out of Hong Kong as a quick case study. And again, I'm not selling, I mean, I have no reasons anyway to try and sell anything to anybody here, right? This is not the right audience. I'm not pitching here. But I want to show you what we're doing to give you an idea. Essentially, we're lowering the risk for investors who invest in film. That's what we do, according to different facets. Making sure people don't run away with the money, making sure that production allocates the money in the right way, that there's no corruption on the production, making sure that people are not locked in for 2 years with their investment, but they can opt out after 6 or 8 months, making sure that the projects are chosen in the right way so we do not invest necessarily on projects that maybe do not, I mean, are bound to fail, basically. And then commercial risk. I mean, so far, the only people who can actually curb down the commercial risk are studios. I mean, they do that because they have a massive marketing machine that can help the film really get to into everybody's head, literally, and so people eventually go and watch it. But independent productions don't have that most of the times. They don't. I mean, they don't have the Marvel firepower, right? So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to pass that because this is going to definitely put you to sleep. So what we do, remember, out of Hong Kong, you know, this is very important. You know, we're not doing that in New York. I don't want to be sued. We're essentially taking institutional private investors, onboarding them, KYC. Like, we don't want drug cartels in our business. We whitelist them. We don't want people who cannot afford to invest either. That's very important. like a lot of people are criticizing the SEC to do what they do and the CFTC, but the truth is they need to be there. They need to protect people. I mean, otherwise people are going to gamble their money away, their house away, and they're going to be ripped off. I mean, and that's what happened in the ICO wave, and that's where people went, oh, hang on, who knows what an ICO is, by the way? All right. Initial coin offering, essentially companies on the basis of an idea and a white paper, essentially a rough business plan, mostly in the 2016 up to the mid 2018, were trying to sell you a bunch of tokens with the promise that these tokens would be the next big thing and you would be a participant in this growth. Totally unregulated, totally a vehicle for money laundering, totally wrong, basically. But the concept is interesting. And I think if the concept gets a little more under control, it's great. I mean, 28 billion were raised that way between 2014 and 2018. 28 billion US dollars. People trusted 28 billion US dollars to invest in these, well, that includes the petrodollar from Venezuela, you know, but it shows you, you know. So at the end of the day, what we have is a system that allows people to trade their participation in a film. And they can trade it from the point of release. So 6 months, 8 months after the film has started, they can opt out of it with a percentage of loss or benefit. Like in the case of Papisha, I'm gonna go through this again. We don't have time for the trailer, I'll let you find it out. I mean, if you put Papisha official trailer, you get it. I like the music of it, but who asked me to dance? No, another time. Well, in the case of Papisha, you know, they needed gap finance, basically. And we came in and we helped them with that. So investors that are not American, they're not from the US, came in, and in their jurisdiction, it was okay to do this. And now they got tokens that they can literally trade back whenever they like. I mean, the film has been released in France, so they can from now on if they want to. Now, the film is in the Oscar race, so I'll let you imagine if, that's speculation, but markets are speculation. If the film gets selected for, if it gets nominated for the Oscars, you can imagine how much these people can make back. And that would be more than any investor in any independent film will ever make. You know, you'd be happy if you don't lose your money as an indie art house film. And this is where we're going. We're going into a world where essentially we're going to open the last 20% to individuals. We're not inventors of this. Yule Bao from Alibaba did that years ago. They financed a slate of 12 Jackie Chan films like this in 15 minutes, if I'm not wrong. Like they raised millions basically in 15 minutes. The strength of this, and this is where I'm talking about how do you curb down the risk, commercial risk, for independent productions, because that's the big thing. You can shout as much as you want. I mean, you can do a Blair Witch Project and be lucky, but most of the times, you're not going to get lucky. How are you going to do about this? Somebody is watching the trailer. Thanks. So, what you do is you open gap essentially to retail investors, individuals, who like the film because they like the story, they like the director, they like the actors, the actresses. Maybe they're just speculators, who knows, you know. But they're engaged emotionally and financially into the film. And these people, about 200,000 people, 1 million, 2 million people, become a brand ambassador for the film. It might not be a hit. If it's a bad film, it will not be a good film, right? If people don't like it, it's not going to save it. But it will not be a total flop either. So it might recoup. And the production company and the investors might be able to reinvest in another film and produce another film. So that's something to be kept in mind. Now, why did I put out of scope for hybrid distribution? Because I don't think blockchain is ready for this yet. I'll tell you why later. And we trace basic capital in the production. So we make sure that essentially every penny that's invested goes on screen. So that's done out of Hong Kong. also now about Hong Kong with development teams that are from Taiwan, Hong Kong, mostly Asia, I would say, and a couple of people, one in San Francisco, a couple of people from Europe. Now, China and blockchain technology, and I think this is where we're getting into the exciting stuff. Sorry for holding you back about generalization about blockchain, explaining why and what, and telling you how it can be used in the creative industries. But what about China? Well, I think this is the novel part, really, is the fact that, I don't know, maybe I would be challenged by Clay or Stan or Jonathan here, but I think China didn't have much say on how the internet was developed initially, right? Well, for blockchain, it's a driving force. It's a global driving force for sure. Why was China not involved in internet development? Well, 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall, Tiananmen, very reminiscent to what's happening these days, but total shame, because at the end of the day, China closed down because of that. Russia was trying to find its balance after this, and many other countries. And so the internet was essentially developed in English mostly. I have nothing against that, you know, it's not because I'm French I'm saying that. But let's be honest, in English, it could be the Brits, you know, kidding. And you don't have any domain names at this point in Cyrillic alphabet or in Chinese characters, right? It's pretty clear it's coming from one side, development. When China woke up a few years later, it was already done. So what it had to do, I'm not saying that to sort of defend the Chinese government or their policies or practices, but you have to reckon that they had to adapt to this. And they built the big, great China firewall. Such an effective system, probably one of the best in the planet, if I should say, most effective, that Fan Bingsing, the father of the firewall, got locked out of it himself about 2 years ago. Great. I can give you a quick anecdote here because I think we have maybe a bit of time. I was working on a shoot in Tianjin, and then we moved to Beijing. And there was a huge explosion in Tianjin back in 2015, summer of 2015, when the index of pollution in Beijing was around 500. You can go run. That explosion in Tianjin, which was supposed to be an accident in a chemical plant, but yet was followed by another explosion in Liaoning, and a couple of other cities in China, plus somebody being literally skewered with a samurai sword in the middle of Beijing. Totally coincidental facts that were not related at all, you know. Well, that information spread like fire, you know. At the time, we had a team, production team, that stayed in Tianjin who sent us pictures and videos about the crater, literally, that was there. There were people were taking videos and CCTV footage, etc. We were a group of 85 people, you know, production people. 85, it's nothing, you know, in Beijing, I mean, it's not even, it's ridiculous, you know. Within 2 hours, all the videos, all the pictures were taken down from our WeChat group. It's that effective, you know, and that's 2015, you know, that's like 4 years back. So I don't even imagine how it is now, you know, I mean, getting a VPN working, I think is pretty tough. So just to tell you how China essentially had to adapt to something they could not control. So instead, they're trying to shape, I think, and the government is trying to shape the way blockchain is being implemented, the way it's being designed, the way it's being rolled out, which is fair enough. You know, don't think I'm actually criticizing, I'm just observing. So Beijing banned cryptocurrencies, rightly so. I mean, same thing as the SEC. I mean, you want to have 10 million people homeless tomorrow. I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, it's a major crisis, right? If you have to deal with 10 million people who've lost their houses and families, not easy. Also, do you want to deal with money laundering, essentially money flowing out of the country? Not easy either, you know, to deal with. So there are certain reasons why this is happening. Despite that fact, I mean, China's tried to control Bitcoin by essentially mining a big proportion of it, or more than 80% actually of Bitcoin is mined in China. ATMs, most of the ATMs, crypto ATMs come out of China, but you can't use them in China, but they come out of China. And you've got about 20,000, I heard I was in Malta at a blockchain summit a few days ago, 20,000 exchanges, crypto exchanges in China. I mean, if you want to write down a list of it, I mean, some of them are insignificant. I mean, they're small, there's no liquidity, there's nothing. 20,000. I mean, we're talking about thousands, you know. I would need to double check that reference. Somebody at a blockchain summit told me that, and they're an authority on the matter, but we're talking about thousands of exchanges, that's for sure. They're not based in China. They might have their offices in Singapore, Zurich, or wherever, but they are still operating in Chinese language. And then the open source mindset that I've talked about. So for people who think, but why decentralizing China? It's already decentralized. Essentially, it's disintermediated and decentralized. There's Alibaba, who's in charge of this. There's Tencent, and there's Baidu. A little bit like Facebook has disintermediated the game, and maybe also you could say Amazon and Google, right? So those are the same. They are mirror companies on one side and the other of the Pacific. Well, the truth is, yes, they have totally disintermediated the businesses, but they have re-intermediated with one intermediary, which is themselves. So it's never been as intermediated as now, I would say. Less complex, but pretty well intermediated. And it's not decentralized. I mean, essentially, I think the most dangerous thing is not Cambridge Analytica and all the things we've been talking about. I think the most dangerous thing is these companies are so big that they're single points of failure. We always said, you know, too big to fail until Enron happened, right? So imagine one of these companies, I'm not going to give any name on which one, I mean, it could be Facebook, it could be Alibaba, it could be Tencent, it could be any of these companies. If any of these companies, for a scandal, for any reason, is losing its core business, they take the entire economy down, and not just in China or the US, but everywhere. So I think that's very concerning, actually. And, well, so the idea is, definitely, in term, we need decentralized systems, because decentralized systems, remember, are resilient. That's the idea. There's no one single point of failure in those systems, and you can continue to work, even if there's a scandal in one company, you just take a note out and you continue. I mean, look at what happened. A lot of respect for Elon Musk, a lot of respect, but, you know, look at what happened with the infamous scandal, you know, earlier. Something ridiculous, you know, something you could not predict, actually. The grain of sand in the clockwork, right? Well, that can happen. So private chains versus public chains, and I think that's why I want, like, there's going to be 3 slides that are very important now. People talk about blockchain and cryptocurrencies interchangeably, and they think it's the same thing. They're 2 very different things. I mean, cryptos use blockchain, but blockchain itself is a little more, I would say, than cryptos. Alibaba, very quickly, and it's like Tencent or Baidu, they've managed to take control of very vital areas of the economy. Logistics, e-commerce, essentially trading, and finance, within financials. Same with Tencent. I mean, more social media, finance. And what I call the iron triangle, and what they call, sorry, the iron triangle, that's not my term, I think is an iron diamond now, because they're taking over media, which is essentially how you advertise yourself, how you portray things. And we know that Alibaba is actually a private company. I mean, it's actually quoted on a stock exchange. But yet, we also know that there are police offices in Alibaba's headquarters. So clearly, it's not really such a private company. Now, it's setting up and rolling out its own blockchain solutions, and those blockchain solutions, and we'll see later, are private blockchain solutions. Essentially, they are centralized blockchain. They use blockchain to make sure every transaction is monitored, that no transaction can be reversed unless they want to reverse it. It's a very different system. It's like if I said, well, I give the block, okay, Sana's answered first, and well, I give him the box of chocolate, but then I say, oh, hang on, actually, I like you better, you know, and I give you the box of chocolate. That's basically how you can roll out the transaction, because you're minting and you're in charge of the chain. So it makes transactions very effective, very fast, like 36,000 transactions per second for the next Chinese cryptocurrency. That's like thousands more than Visa. 36,000 transactions per second. Nothing faster than this, you know. But then on the other end, it's totally centralized and clearly serves a purpose. Now, that's what Alibaba is connected to. Now we got pseudo-decentralized application like NEO, which used to be called Ant. Apparently a coincidence with Ant Financials from Alibaba, but 7 nodes. And that's why I say it's semi-decentralized, because there's only 7 areas and super nodes that can actually validate the transactions. Da Hongfei, very nice person from Shanghai, very charismatic. His chain has been adopted by music applications, and the value has actually increased since I put that down. I mean, it's above 700 million now. They can do a lot with that, you know. And I think, but it's based in Singapore. See, that's the first thing. Tron, the man who's announcing the announcement, Justin Sun. He's very good at PR, also a very good friend of Jack Ma, and clearly a very well-connected man, so well-connected that when he tried to meet Warren Buffett recently, and potentially he was claiming Donald Trump, to explain to them how he was going to roll out this decentralized system, he got stopped at the Beijing airport and was not let out of the country. So what I'm saying is, no matter how this man wants decentralized projects, coercive methods still exist, you know. And I would say, I mean, it's a huge company. I mean, it's like more than $1 billion capitalization, if you wish. They took over BitTorrent, which is one of the largest peer-to-peer network on the planet. And even though they started with a massive controversy with plagiarism on the white paper from day one, from copying Ethereum, etc., they've actually gone a long way. And truly, this, if it's well rolled out, everybody's laughing about them because they plagiarize and ha ha ha. Well, now they got BitTorrent. That's not nothing. If they play their cards right, well, Justin Sun might well just break part of Netflix system. It become a mega upload that cannot be stopped. Think about it, you know, the implications of this for the film industry. So, recent events. Well, I think we've looked east and west and back again, and we've seen Libra being developed by Facebook, and we've seen it essentially hitting a wall, a regulatory wall, which is good. I think, you know, people should definitely think twice before allowing this to happen at such a scale. 2.5 billion, right? People. I mean, that's not a small thing. It's not a small ICO with like 2 or 3 million people following it. That's important. So pretty happy, actually, they didn't get through yet, you know. But it shows you where this is going. Now, it gave a lot of pressure to China to actually catch up with this before Libra gets out and running, or Google Coin, or Amazon Coin, or whatever it is, you know. So essentially, the People's Bank of China has been designing a currency. It's not there yet. I mean, the latest news I got was from somebody who's working on the board of that initiative, and they were telling me that they were looking at different scenarios. I mean, they're looking at quite interestingly a currency that's quite agile. You know, it's not going to be just one currency, like a stable coin, essentially a coin that's pegged, say, on the renminbi. It's going to have different uses. And the way you use it could also have you to earn more, you know. So there's like an incentive to use it. They're looking at different ways to design it. That's what I'm saying. But, so surprisingly or unsurprisingly, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu are among the 5 or 6, 7 companies that have had access to this. So pretty clearly, that's private chain, and that's a centralized system, again, that's being rolled out. Have NEO or TRON been involved in this? No. No, everybody was confused because everybody was like, oh, but hang on a second. Cryptocurrency is banned, but blockchain is pushed literally by the government. And I'm like, well, that's not a contradiction in term. It's like saying that it is a contradiction to have a capitalist economy and yet a communist political system. And they've shown that it's a paradox for us. It's not a paradox for China, right? So this is not a paradox either. I mean, cryptocurrencies are trying to replace essentially currencies, assets that are firmly grounded into the Chinese economy. They're out as much as possible. Blockchain, however, is a technology that can help you monitor, like never before, any transactions, any piece of data. And when you combine it with AI, believe me, this is deadly. This is not, I mean, I'm not going to say this is 1984, but it could be. So this is the world I showed you. Sorry, Netflix should have been taken out. This is the world the way it could be. I mean, I'm exaggerating here. This is not proper academic actually referencing. But think about it. Could be. So I think, however, Alibaba and Youku Today, it's a sort of streaming company, are a first step, which we call platform capitalism, into blockchainization, if you want, platformization to blockchainization. Now, theoretically, the whole thing at the beginning was that to get from the centralized traditional system to a pseudo-decentralized system like Alibaba or Amazon, to eventually this, which is what we've been talking about. Now, is that going to happen today? I can't tell you for sure, actually. There's going to be a lot of resistance. There's going to be a lot of friction, to take the wordings of Lucy Montgomery and John Hartley. A lot of friction because there's going to be conflict between centralized systems and decentralized systems. Somebody could speculate and say that maybe China is, this is pure speculation, do not quote me on this, it's something that needs to be researched. Maybe China is just trying to lock things in, keep all the data in control inside China, and encourage disruption and decentralization outside of China. That wouldn't be a bad strategy, I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I don't think so. In fact, I don't know. So, right? So, but it's something to think about. I'm going to pass that because I think that's going to bore you to death. But it's about all the companies you saw essentially on the grid, knowing that there are scams. I said it to you before. Their companies are essentially just PR companies. They don't do anything. They're companies that are quite established. Francis Ford Coppola's, Decentralized Pictures, Proxycoin. Brian Kavanaugh, Relativity Media, Leonardo DiCaprio has announced through APNY the tokenization of Bushnell's biopic, Atari founder. So there are a lot of very interesting models out there. However, if you look at what's been done so far, not a lot actually on the creative side. Like a few films were financed through crypto assets, but what's the big deal? I mean, you could finance a film with gold if you want to, agave, I'm sure, if you convert it. CryptoKitties jammed the network 2 years ago when I was here doing my research, I remember, just with 2 to 10 million people using it. So there's still a long way to go, and that's why I'm saying limitations and challenges, and that's where we got to be critical. I'm almost finished after that, but I think it's very, very important to look at this. In terms of environment, proof of work does take a lot of energy and calculation power. If you compare it to bank, you could argue banks also take a lot of power and energy, but to be able to administrate the amount of assets that banks are administering, you'll be talking like 100-folds, And at the moment, Bitcoin on its own is taking as much energy as the country of Ireland, So that needs to be addressed. I mean, proof of work is not going to work, actually. Proof of stake is the way to go, but it's too short here. I mean, there's enough actually for about 10 lectures here. But just suffice to say that there's a lot of problems having to do with collusion, proof of stake, because you're giving people essentially the way to deposit the assets, and that's the proof you need to validate the blocks. And sometimes, essentially, people can create dual accounts, for example. How do you make sure this doesn't happen, that double spending doesn't happen? I don't want to get back into the nitty-gritties of it, but this is really an issue. Again, what I've been talking about is we're getting into more control spaces, yes or no? I mean, should we talk about this before it happens? Should people be involved in this, informed about it, educated about it, which is what we're doing? Sharing information is very important. Technical issues, a lot, scalability being one of the worst. The reason why I put out a scope for distribution at the moment is that no chain, not even Bitcoin or Litecoin or the fastest, Ripple would be good enough and scalable enough to ensure what I explained to you before, the fractional payments of online tickets and theatrical tickets to hundreds of millions of people. No chain can do this yet. It will take time. Quantum computer attacks. I mean, Google came up. I mean, I had a friend who was in computer science. He was like, oh, don't worry about computer attacks. I mean, quantum computers are not going to come for another 20 years. Well, guess what? Maybe not. So this clearly has to be addressed because the sheer power of these computers could actually make chains totally irrelevant, actually, purposeless. I'll keep legal issues for the end. Oh, no, actually, well, legal issues. Yeah, the regulators don't know where to start. I mean, in the US, what is this? What are crypto assets? Are they securities? Are they commodities? Are they assets? Some countries have already made a decision. Hong Kong says Bitcoin is a commodity. That's it. All right, well, is the US thinking the same or not? I mean, you can see most of the regulators are taken aback by something they've never seen before. They don't know how to categorize it. Second, the legal system, we talk about legal system all the time, but the legal system is not the legal system, it's the legal systems. And they do not agree with each other. A place like Malta, for example, loves this because they're like, oh yeah, come to us because it's fine. A crypto asset, it's totally legal in our place. Estonia, Gibraltar, all these places, Liechtenstein. They emerge as components on how blockchain is being created now. And I think it's very important to keep an eye on this. Adoption, of course, Ujo, for example, perfect platform for music sharing. They managed to get people on board, celebrities. But I had the catalog. It's always content is king. The catalog is very limited. So people don't want to use it. And it's a perfect platform. It works. You're an artist. You go on Ujo. You will be paid every single time somebody downloads your music. But nobody uses it. There's no audience for it. So adoption is a problem. And social aspects, which I think should not be underestimated. It's always about computer literacy, access, because these devices are expensive, more and more expensive, and also, think about it, essentially what is proposed here is everybody, I always hear, people, that's the big thing in blockchain, let's bank the unbanked. I'm sure you've all heard about that. Great, let's bank the unbanked. Okay, do they want to be banked in the first place? Good question. I know people in Mongolia who do not want cash even. They just go, they're nomads. They say, the minute I have this, I lose my freedom. But let's imagine that everybody wants to be banked. Well, okay, you're banking people who become their own banks. Now, that's okay probably in Los Angeles, although, it's okay in Singapore. The only risk you're going to have is to fall and sleep on a banana skin, and that's the worst that can happen to you in Singapore. And maybe not even, because I don't think the banana skins are going to stay more than 10 seconds on the floor. But imagine you're in Venezuela, and you're your own bank, walking bank. You're dead, So that's something to think about as well. So short, medium, long term, this is how I'm going to conclude. Short term, definitely enterprise solutions, as I said, intranet solutions. And those are going to be around securitization. How do we finance films? How do we reduce the risk to film finance? Then IP rights management, that takes a long time to set up a ledger with rights, but people are already working on it. 2 to 3 years from now, 5, 10 years and beyond, we're talking basically about the possibility that I explained before. People will be able to finance or co-finance, become producers of the films that they will champion. And they will receive fractional returns on a timely basis, in real time, every time somebody buys a ticket for it. And taxman might also be paid on time, at the same time. Why not? That's how you get adoption, right? But there will be a lot, and I guess that's it. Forget about this. I mean, we've already talked about it, but there will be a lot of friction between centralized and decentralized systems. I mean, we've already talked about that, but I think further research angles as what happens to rural China in all this, to people who don't have access to internet also. Different scenarios. Are we going to 1984? Are we going to Mad Max sort of scenario, somewhere in between probably? And also the captains of the blockchain industry. I mean, if you meet all these people, there's a man called CZ in China who's like the owner essentially of the biggest internet exchange, crypto exchange in the world. Well, I mean, this guy's a billionaire. He's pretty low-profile billionaire. I mean, he's sending money right, left, and center to charity causes. They have a different mindset. These kids, I mean, I can call him a kid, actually. But these guys are young. They want environmental issues to be addressed. They have a very different mindset. They're not, nothing against Mark Zuckerberg, but they're not Mark Zuckerberg, That's my point. So how is that going to go? I'm going to pass that, actually. But to go to the end of the end, you remember when I showed you 3rd of January 2009? The times. 10 years later, this year, BitMEX, one of the largest exchanges that makes like about 1 million net profit per day, plants a joke here. Thanks, Satoshi, we owe you one. Yeah, 1 million a day. You certainly owe me one. That's true. 10th anniversary of Bitcoin. Now look at the title. 10 years later, credit crunch as debt spiral for universities. We learned from the mistakes of 2008. That's a big question. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to be too controversial, but sometimes we have to say things. So I'm up for it. Thank you very much.